How can you talk like this? Your gun has got you everything you have. Isn't that true? Well, isn't it true?
Yeah, sure, everything. After a while, you can call bartenders and faro dealers by their first name. Maybe 200 of them. Rented rooms you live in, 500. Meals you eat in hash houses, 1,000. Home, none. Wife, none. Kids, none. Prospects, 0. Suppose I left anything out?
Yeah. Places you're tied down to, none. People with a hold on you, none. Men you step aside for, none.
Insults swallowed, none. Enemies, none.
No enemies?
Alive. Well, this is the kind of arithmetic I like.
This is the emergency podcast system. This is not a test. Movies are bombing all over the country. They are posing as movies you already know. They may already be in your theaters, your neighbor's home, or even your own. Do not panic. Specialists have been dispatched. They will help you identify these pretenders and defend you against this invasion of the remake. Please stand by for further instructions. Welcome to the Invasion of the Remake podcast. I am your host, Jason Bishop, and today we are talking about chemistry. Yes, we're going to talk about science, that awkward thing called chemistry, specifically how chemistry works in an ensemble piece like The Magnificent Seven. I think that's going to be very important.
Yep.
And to be part of this conversation is Trish Coughlin.
Hey, everybody.
Sam Stepanenko.
Hello, hello.
We are the OK3.
The OK3. The
Terrific Three?
terrific trio.
Yeah.
Talkative trio?
We're not the Three Amigos. I am not doing that dance.
Nope, but Three Amigos was kind of a parody
a takeoff
of
on
this.
Yes, it was.
This thing is, and Magnificent Seven is also a remake, a Western remake of Seven Samurai. Why aren't we talking about Seven Samurai today? Because it is getting its own remake treatment down the road, so we'll cover it in a different pod. And Seven Samurai inspired a lot of films, not just Magnificent Seven. And we might mention them in passing within this podcast as well, but we can't talk about all the films that were inspired by Seven Samurai and television and whatnot because it's numerous. It's a lot.
Oh, absolutely. Like,
And it's really long.
Yeah. Like, I think we could just spend the next podcast just saying, okay, Seven Samurai, and then mentioning everything else by name, and that will take up our entire hour and a half.
Exactly. So we're going to just narrow our focus down to Magnificent Seven, call this episode 2 or 3 within the multiple parts that Seven Samurai is probably going to be. Seven Samurai being part 1. Let's call this part 2. It's kind of like doing Star Wars. We're going to start somewhere in the middle, and we'll somewhere along the way we'll complete the trilogy.
There we go.
Right?
Sounds
right.
good.
Because there was a movie that was a sci-fi remake of Seven Samurai that I actually wanted to give the remake treatment to, but it's kind of weird to do a remake of something that's a remake already.
Yeah.
Well, it's not, technically, it's not really a remake. It's an inspired by.
It's inspired by.
Yeah.
That's true. And I'm talking about Battle Beyond the Stars. So.
True.
And George Papard was initially thought
Yeah.
about being cast in the original Seven Samurai.
And he did play Chris's role in a later
That's right.
sequel.
That's right.
See, we do our research.
Yes, yeah. And also Robert Vaughn, who's in this movie, plays a new role with the Magnificent Seven television show as well. So lots of bridges, and he just passed away just last year. He was the last of the Magnificent Seven to pass.
Yeah, he was alive. They moved up the release date for this to like September 2016, and he died like
A few weeks later. Yeah.
So he saw it. Like he lived to see it being remade.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
in 1984, I think they were going to do one. And
I'm
it just
guessing
never
he
happened.
wasn't healthy enough to be offered a part within the film. So
No, I think he was very ill at that point.
yeah, sad about his passing, but he had lived to a nice, ripe old age and outlived a lot of his compatriots, even though he was older than some of them.
Yep.
And we have his great performance in this movie. I really liked him in it.
Yeah, this movie.
I liked everybody in it.
I really enjoyed. I think this may be the first time I've seen it. It's hard to keep track of all the westerns I watched with my father, but there's something about Yul Brynner that didn't appeal to me as a kid. And maybe it's just the bald head.
Well, I think it's because
I don't know.
We always associated him with The King and I.
Yes.
Right? And
maybe
that's just not something that ever appealed to me when I was younger. It wasn't my
what
subject
kid
matter.
would
Right?
be into that?
Right. So
I did watch it. But it's like you say, it's such an iconic character. It's hard to disassociate him from that.
right, but my mind opened up to him after Westworld, and I have seen this before because I'm a huge fan of westerns.
I'm, to be honest, am just discovering his work now, and I suddenly really see the appeal of him. His accent's a little weird to see in a Western, basically the American West, and I think his character was supposed to be Cajun. Not even close with that accent of his, but
No.
it's fine. I let that slide. He still had that deeper voice or something about him, man.
He has a presence. He
He's a presence.
truly is a presence when he's on the screen there.
Yeah, when you speak
Yeah.
about the voice, like I remember The King and I, I'm like, I don't remember that timbre at all. So it was kind of weird to watch him in this area, like being like who he was.
And this is quite the cast. You've got Yul Brynner playing Chris Adams, Steve McQueen, Vin Tanner, Charles Bronson, another guy I didn't really care for as a kid, and I didn't understand where this tough guy persona came from and why people thought this old middle-aged dad-looking guy was this tough guy. Then I saw him in this, and I'm like, he's a huge dude. He's a mountain of a man, and he has a certain presence and kindness to him, but he can look mean. I'm like, oh, I get it now.
Oh yeah. This movie, I was like, okay, yeah, Charles Bronson. I totally get the appeal now, like a young
Yeah.
Charles.
Well, yeah, anybody who's watched the Death Wish movies, especially the later ones, like the first Death Wish is good, and that's where I sort of knew him as a tough guy and
And going to
recognized
be
him.
getting a remake treatment. It's actually being shot as we speak. I think it's going to be out either late this year, because I think a trailer's out now. So it's going to be either late this year or early next. And Bruce Willis, meh.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean those later ones with Charles Bronson, that's where he became kind of a parody of himself because he was in his 60s and he looked old, and he's one of those men who should never wear a mustache, and he did, and it didn't work. Right?
No, I'm trying to imagine seeing that mustache on his face. I'm like, oh, it totally changes his look.
Yeah.
I certainly prefer him without, for
He's
sure.
a handsome man.
Yeah. Eli Wallach was the villain Calvera. Horst Buchholz. Whew, I hope I got that right. He was Chico. He was another one who was born outside the States. He played a Mexican, the kid in this movie. Robert Vaughn, who plays the PTSD character Lee. We're going to get into him. Brad Dexter was Harry Luck. And James Coburn as Britt. It's quite the cast, with Rosenda Monteros as Petra as well. Another major character. And we're also going to be talking about the remake along the way, but the original film, I should mention, John Sturges did this. He did a lot of great westerns, and this was a good stint in his directing life, even though this wasn't domestically a very well-received film. I mean, at a $2 million budget, its domestic take was just a little above that. At $2,250,000, but it did quite well overseas. I couldn't find a number for overseas, but it did very well, and that's why the movie spawned 3 more sequels in the television series. So, did good stuff, and then that followed it up with Great Escape. So, great time in his career. Obviously, Akira Kurosawa, who had done the original Seven Samurai, really liked this film. Out of all the fan mail he could get, Akira Kurosawa sent him a samurai sword. How awesome is that?
That is probably the best stamp of approval you could ever get.
Right?
Absolutely.
Great. From a great filmmaker like Akira Kurosawa.
Probably one of the most influential filmmakers ever.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, bottom line, he has got to be one of the most influential.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you
ever.
think about his works, and several of them inspired other movies and westerns and the things that the U.S. film market has cribbed over years.
Yeah, and also not just a great filmmaker. I mean, when you do a remake, you're taking the chance that you'll either alienate the person who first did it because they're like, that's not what I meant. But to get that stamp of approval from the guy who did it, actually did it,
High praise.
it's huge.
Yeah, this, as we said, it was based on Seven Samurai with the screenplay by Akira Kurosawa, Shinobu Hashimoto, and Hideo Oguni, who went uncredited on that film. The screenplay was credited to William Roberts, but he only came in late in the process to do last-minute edits. Walter Bernstein and Walter Newman went uncredited, and Walter Newman... Bernstein wrote the initial script, and it mainly got a huge rewrite. Newman did all the heavy lifting on this, but didn't like some of the last-minute edits on set that wound up happening to his script, and asked for his name to be taken off, and I'm sure he regrets that to this day, because it is a fine, fine film.
It truly is.
Yeah. The remake, Magnificent Seven, just from last year, 2016, directed by Antoine Fuqua from Training Day, Equalizer, and Olympus Has Fallen, and you might recognize some of the cast in this film from some of those other ones. Denzel Washington, Equalizer. Chris Pratt. They've worked together before. There was a film they worked together on, and it's escaping me. Ethan Hawke, who's been in, I think, 3 Anton Fuqua
including
movies.
Training Day with Denzel Washington.
That's right. Vincent D'Onofrio, Byung-hun Lee, Manuel Garcia, Martin Senmeier, and Haley Bennett, who also worked with Anton Fuqua recently as well. I think it was on The Equalizer.
Yeah, I think so.
And Peter Sarsgaard.
Who's in everything now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Pretty
just look for which character Skarsgård's going to be playing.
The screenplay for this one was Nick Pizzolatto, who had a lot to do with the True Detective television series. And second season, sorry.
Explains a lot about this remake, actually.
And Richard Wank also co-wrote the screenplay, and he worked on The Equalizer with Denzel Washington, and what I think is the only good Expendables movie, number 2.
So, what was the name again?
Expendables?
No, Richard.
Oh, Richard Wank.
Wank. Okay.
You have to spell it for her, Jay.
Not wank. Wank.
Wink.
With
okay.
With an E.
You put a little spin on that E, and I was like, what?
Yeah, you make it as you will. I didn't do the joke in my head.
I heard it, didn't see it written, so that's...
All good. All good. This movie was budgeted, depending on your source, around $90 to $107 million. Opening weekend was $34.7 million with a U.S. gross of almost $93.4 million, with I think a worldwide box office of $162.4 million. Also, not a huge success at that. I mean, you kind of have to double, if not triple, your budget these days. So it did okay. Everybody got paid, but didn't even hit the double the budget number. So we're probably not going to get a franchise out of this.
I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that too. I am.
Sometimes you just don't need the franchise.
Well, it's hard now because Westerns aren't really in vogue.
They haven't been for a long time. They have these little peaks and they try to be revived, but they never really come back to the popular they were in the late 50s.
We don't have
mid-70s.
We don't have those bigger than life Western stars anymore. We don't have John Wayne's and Clint Eastwood's doing this anymore that got known for doing these and known for that tough guy role. I mean, obviously Clint Eastwood transcended that, did a lot of other things, but you never forget that presence.
Well, we don't have the directors either,
that anymore.
Right? That's the thing. We don't have the Henry Fords and the Sergio Leones either, right? The directors who clearly love the genre and really do make the best of it. Right?
I think we've had some fine westerns in the modern era, but they are few and far between.
It's also, and it's mostly the audiences. They're not flocking to a western anymore. They just aren't.
No.
I mean, like we've talked about before, if you use a western script and put it in space, everybody will show up. But it's the fact that it's in the Old West, I think that people just really don't go for it.
Even modern spins, I think No Country for Old Men is one of the finest westerns ever made. And it's completely modern, but it's very much a western in my mind.
You're absolutely correct. It is. I
Yeah.
mean, when it comes right down to it, that's exactly what that movie is.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe it's just the packaging. Maybe people just can't associate with it. But it's not like people could really associate it within the 60s either. But maybe they were just closer to the era. But
that's what I was going to say is I mean, when this movie was set in the late 1860s, they're less than 100 years removed from it. It's still it's still quite part of the recent history when it comes down to it, right?
Well, and also you have the whole bit too, where at that period of time you had like a lot of TV shows. You had The Lone Ranger, you had Zorro. It was popular on television. It was popular in film. It was like when I look at Woody from Toy Story, I think it's a 1960s setting. I don't actually think the Toy Story takes place when it was made because Woody seems like such an old toy.
The other thing too is
I'd agree with that.
Science fiction and speculative fiction were pulp literature, right? So it wasn't a genre that people really grabbed onto until like the mid 70s when you had the Steven Spielbergs and the George Lucases starting to delve into that genre as an art form rather than as a throwaway horror piece, right? Because in the 50s and 60s, science fiction wasn't designed to stimulate your thought. It was designed to scare you. It was threaten you with the aliens and make you scared. Yeah. So I think that's part of it too, is we have these new genres that kind of took the place of Westerns.
I think everything comes around again, and maybe the fascination with Westerns will come around again as well. It's kind of like World War II movies come full circle every few decades. And, they're not in vogue right now either.
Well, I think there were a few in the 80s that did fine as well. We just haven't hit that next circle yet.
Yeah.
Well, the 80s was very much the Vietnam War. That's when it was finally acceptable to make movies about that particular conflict. So we did have war movies, but not necessarily World War II. But the war movie as a genre, it does sort of ebb and flow. We might see a resurgence of it with Dunkirk out right now. I mean, that's going to certainly draw attention to the war movie as a genre again.
I mean, the genre never goes away, and things trickle out, and you'll get a Magnificent Seven, and you never know. I mean, something might click, but these movies were so great the first time, other than giving them a bit of a facelift and better set decking, a little more accurate set and costume design. It's going to be tough to match up those performances and
story,
meet that level.
Right. I mean, that's one of the. It's only a remake in spirit in my mind because they did change the story substantially enough that it deviates far enough to be almost to be new, but it keeps the core of the story. Yeah, their
characters, the names are different. You can correlate at least half of the seven.
Most of them.
You can correlate most of them, but when it came down to it, I think what really made these movies stand out is chemistry.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, the remake doesn't have it.
There's a few moments of it. The chemistry between Ethan Hawke and
Byung-hun Lee.
Bill Rocks?
Billy Rocks.
Billy Rocks, yeah. There was chemistry there. When those two were on screen together, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
right? I think that
those two did. Yes.
Yeah, I really enjoyed those moments. But everybody else,
but they were partners. They needed to.
Yeah. But everybody else felt like they were
individuals.
They were on screen by themselves, and they never really genuinely interacted with people.
See, and I feel there's a bit where I feel that the kind of loss of chemistry made the most sense, and with Vincent D'Onofrio, he was basically so separate from everybody else in that group. Him not quite belonging actually makes the most sense in this movie.
I thought he was in an entirely different movie.
Yeah,
he was so much fun to watch.
But he was,
man, he always brings it, doesn't he?
He was so external to the group, but that's the thing. His
character was supposed to be.
He was supposed to be.
I think what's missing in the remake is some of the natural conflict that these characters should have with each other. There's a little bit of poking, but it should be accentuated, and we should see these characters come together despite some of their natural inclinations to be at odds with each other. You have two Confederate soldiers in there. You have a Union soldier who... a black Union soldier, no less, who should really have some beefs with the Confederates.
Yeah.
You have Vincent D'Onofrio's character, who's a scalp hunter, who, hundreds of Comanche scalps, and then you have a Comanche with Red Harvest. And then you can see that Faraday has a problem with Mexicans, with Vasquez. There's a little bit of poking there as well. And this is at a time where there's a lot of racism going on. And let's face it, in that era, I mean, this is nothing against Asians at all, but in the
that era,
1800s, nobody liked the Asians.
Yeah, it was they were really, really looked down upon. I mean, I think the only part of the movie that I kind of felt sort of worked was when Goodnight was talking about how he met him, and the whole point of it was like, what got him to look past the fact that he was Asian was like, I saw him bare knuckle fight this whole bar full of guys. So I'm like, yeah,
and I
I'm
think
fine.
there should have been more of that because that's a good theme to address, especially these days with some of the political climate. I mean, granted, it takes a year or two sometimes to get these movies out, and maybe they just didn't see it. But it would have been a great thing to see all these pieces of this group come together against these natural inclinations of racism or just political separatism, and come together for this good cause of defending this town.
Turn a begrudging partnership into a genuine partnership, and that's and it was missing.
It was. I mean, it seems so obvious when you're watching it that where is this? This should be in here because we should see this conflict and then overcome them and realize how stupid it really is.
Well, it was weird. I could see the notes where they were trying to do it, like with Faraday and Denzel Washington. The fact that he bought him back his horse, that was supposed to be a whole thing, and like how he got him out of a jam with his horse. It was supposed to be a grudging, but it doesn't really work. And then they had a bit where it's Faraday and the Mexican guy talking, and they sort of get past it. Like at one point they seem to team up, but we missed the part
where they got over their
stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of it was clearly cut out or left out to give room for more of these action scenes. Right, which is one of the most annoying things about modern filmmaking is the sacrifice of character development for a stunning visual or a big action scene, and it happens far too often. Right, because a lot of these great actors were wasted.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave it there. We're going to run the original trailer, and we will get back to more of that. I think that's a great point, and we definitely will touch on more of that after this.
777, the Magnificent Seven. They were only 7, but they fought like 700 to bring the kind of justice that would last. 777, the Magnificent Seven. They made a brave stand, the Magnificent Seven. They fought for the future to wipe away their past. The Magnificent Seven.
Ride on.
Ride on. Somehow I don't think you solved my problem.
Solving your problems isn't in our line.
We deal in lead, friend.
So do I. We're in the same business, huh?
Only as competitors.
Get up and face me! Do you get up?
Look what I found.
So that's where they were. You hid them.
Sure they hid them. But she won't tell me where. They're afraid. She's afraid of me, you, him, all of us. Farmers. Their families told them we'd rape them.
Seven. They were only 7, but they fought like 700 to bring the kind of justice that would last. They made a brave stand, the Magnificent Seven. They fought for the future to wipe away their past. 777, the Magnificent Seven. The Magnificent Seven.
All right. That was a cool trailer.
Yes, it was a cool trailer.
777.
Oh, I can't remember who scored this movie, but there's another prominent score writer who was in the orchestra of this. Okay, Trish is bouncing. Who is it?
John Williams.
Yeah, he played the piano.
Nice.
And obviously went on to one hell of a career as well.
No, not at all.
No. Nobody can think of a single John Williams score. No.
No. He's not at all the first person you think of when you think score.
Yeah.
No.
And it's funny. And this score is iconic on its own, because when you're watching it, you don't realize that how much of this music is still you hear today. Right? We were watching it when I was watching it with my wife, and they're playing that one piece, the dum da dum da da.
I always associate it as like the Ponderosa song.
Yeah.
It is, but it's from this movie. And I'm like, do you recognize that, hon? And she listens, she's like, oh my God, I totally recognize that. I'm like,
Yeah. I think it was used in some cigarette ad for years.
Marlboro.
Yeah, before my time, I think. But
when they could still advertise cigarettes on
make
TV.
ads.
yeah, I remember cigarette ads, but I don't remember the music. Obviously, I was too young to give a shit.
But it was funny. It's funny, like when you close your eyes and listen to it, you're like, I'm obviously listening to a Western soundtrack.
Yes.
Obviously.
Yeah. A 60s or 70s, at least a 60s to 70s Western soundtrack. You're absolutely right. It's very clearly Western music, but it's not like it's not that like what we consider Western music nowadays. But when you really think about it, that's what a Western soundtrack sounded like when they were making these movies.
Mm-hmm. Because I think it's supposed to incorporate the fact that it is a vast land and it is a grand scale, and I just love that. That's
for
what you
sure.
get from it.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more of the original movie. Yul Brynner, he initially brought in he had cast approval. I guess if you're Yul Brynner and you made some Oscar-winning movies, you can have some of that clout. And he brought in Steve McQueen, who was also working on a Western television show at the time, who actually couldn't get released to do the movie.
Until he had a quote-unquote accident.
Yeah, he had a car accident and was off sick and then filmed this movie. Uh-huh. Oh, the legend of Steve McQueen, my God. It just grows, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you want to hear more, go back to the Blob episode.
Thank you, Trish. I was going to just make that pop myself. But yes, the second time we've talked about Steve McQueen, at least he looked like he was the age of the cast this time.
My God, yes. So much better in this movie.
Yeah.
Yes, so Yul Brynner brought him in, much to his eternal regret.
Not eternal. Apparently they made up before Steve McQueen died.
On McQueen's deathbed, yes.
Yeah. So it's not eternal.
Steve McQueen kept trying to upstage Yul Brynner during his scenes, and if you watch the movie, you'll see him tip his hat, or there's a scene where
he shakes the shells.
Or he moves over the side of his horse to fill up his hat with water. Just scene-stealing stuff, to the point where he was like, I don't want Yul Brynner to have a horse bigger than mine. And I think it was Vaughn.
Vaughn had the bigger horse.
Vaughn had a bigger horse, and he goes, I don't care about you. It's Yul Brynner's horse I give a shit about. So it was very much who is the lead of this film.
Well, Yul Brynner also countered with, he's like, if you take off your damn hat again, I'll take my hat off, and nobody will ever look at you again for the rest of the film.
That big shiny bald head of his. And he would have been totally right. Nobody would have looked at Steve McQueen at all.
Nope.
Exactly.
That's quite the counterpunch, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that says a lot about these guys as well, because it doesn't seem that way on camera. Like, there is good chemistry between these two actors.
Yeah, they seem like they're genuinely friendly. I mean, considering they just met when Vin, was it not Vin? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Vin was backed Chris up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that whole opening scene with the hearse and stuff like that, they didn't know each other, and you don't realize that until after it's done that they didn't know each other.
And wow, wasn't that the commentary on racism that should have been in the remake?
Yes.
And it's just one thing that gets these guys together, because they are burying an Indian, and some of the townsfolk are against having him buried within their plot of land. It's ridiculous. Some of them think it's ridiculous anyway, but they're very split about it, to the point where some of them are armed right at the gravesite, and it's not far.
No, it's not very far at all.
And it's sort of like these two guys from out of town are like, look, I frickin' paid. You're going to put him in the ground. And then the guy who runs the funeral home is like, I can't. Like, these
Here's
guys
your
are
money
going to
back,
go insane.
Yeah, and it's not like he didn't want to. The guy deserved his service, and nobody was going to drive the hearse up the hill. And so, Yul Brynner's character, Chris, just says, I'll do it. And he's watching this, Steve McQueen, I think his character, Vin, was just like, I kind of dig this guy, and this could be fun.
Yeah.
I've never ridden shotgun on a hearse before.
Yeah.
And see, that's what it could have been, I think, in the remake, is it couldn't have been, like, they have these tensions between these people, but it could have been that whole thing is like, fuck, we just finally realized it was bullshit. Like, have them be those people who are like, yeah, I'm sick of this garbage where people are just stomping on each other, and we're just getting shot for it. Fuck it.
They did more in an opening, inconsequential scene than they did in the entire movie of the remake. So.
And they had the perfect opportunity at the beginning of this remake. I mean, you have a black marshal walking into this town to arrest somebody.
The closest
well,
they
dead
get,
or alive.
He's getting stared at a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of death stares, but not much else.
No, and there could have been a lot of like really backhanded, unpleasant, but backhanded dialogue.
Yeah, this is only a few years after the Civil War, so. And you get the feeling he's more known as a bounty hunter than just for being black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, and they never really address like the fact like, that he is well known as. I mean, he has to sort of tell everybody, and he does it more than once, which kind of frustrated me. How a marshal in Kansas and the
lawmen and
the free territories, and it's like a 2-minute freaking spiel.
And it happens like 5 times in the movie.
Although
I didn't count. But.
I know how you find it annoying, but if you look at the realistic portion of it,
he would have had to.
Yeah. Nobody, like, we're talking about like getting mail a year after somebody sends it. You're never going to get notification anywhere.
Yeah.
Really. So it's sort of, he would have to. It's not an information superhighway.
No, but it's the fact they had to do it so often was also kind of painstaking. There could have been some creative editings where he starts doing it and you don't have to hear the whole spiel every time.
What it could have been is it could have been people like Faraday who would be like, I know exactly who this dude is, and I don't know why you guys don't.
I guess some of that does come to play right near the end with Denzel's Sam Chisholm character. We get a little bit of payoff of what happened to him personally at the end, and they never talk about it. They never hint about it throughout the entire film.
They do. There's a when Goodnight is sitting to talk to him. He's a bit about where she'd be about the same age as his sister, right? Would be now, right?
Yeah,
right.
We do. Yeah, that's true. We do.
The only hint you get, though,
we get one hint about something happened to his family. Maybe we needed it a little bit more, but. You kind of forget by the time you get to that moment.
Well, there's a couple other points where Goodnight hints at it, but if you're not paying attention, you're going to miss it.
Yeah.
And it could have been where that could have been another whole moment where it's like Goodnight, that's why they're good friends.
Yeah.
Goodnight realized how horrifying everything was.
Yeah, and I mean, Chisholm, he certainly didn't give off the airs that he was a gun for hire. Like, yes, he was after bounties, but he's a licensed lawman and wasn't initially interested in those townspeople's problem until Bogue's name came up. So you get a sense that maybe there's something personal there.
There's something personal there, yeah. And then there's also that bit of the great line. It's like, I've been paid a lot before, but I've never been paid everything. Love the fact they kept that line in this remake.
There's a few.
I love that line.
Every line that stood out for me in the original is pretty much intact in the remake.
Yeah.
So
in different spots, but
yeah, sometimes used for different reasons, but they're there, and I'm glad they're there because I had never seen either one of these films. They stood out for me in the first film. I was very happy to see them in the second one.
I have to say, in the second one, what they did really well that I enjoyed was, in the original, they have the thing about the guy falling off the building. It's going fine so far.
Yeah.
And what they did in the remake was, every time something terrible was happening, like, oh, it's going fine so far. And it just kept coming back. I've been shot.
So good,
so far, so good.
Yeah. I love that they turned it into a running gag without making it like really blatant.
Yeah.
Because and that's the other thing that bothered me with the movie. Some of that humor felt so forced. Right? Like it just felt out of place. I mean, there's the gallows humor.
Yeah.
But Pratt's character was too smart alecky for me.
But that's kind of what he's making a career at now.
I know.
It does feel a little bit out of place at how much he does it, but I did like his bit of that magician character.
Oh, I love that part,
The sleight of hand guy, that it's, you're not paying attention to the right thing. That lesson he tries to tell Teddy Q, Luke Grimes' character. And at first it's like, snatch the card out of my hand, and the second time he lets him have it, and then actually no, it's the third time he lets him have it, and then he pulls his gun. It's like it was never about the card.
Yeah.
And that was a great parallel to the clapping scene in the first movie.
Yeah, and it foreshadows what's going to happen later on with Chris Pratt's Faraday character near the end of the film.
Yeah.
Is sleight of hand distracting them from what he's really doing.
Yeah, there are some really great bits in this remake. Right? There's just not enough of them.
Yeah.
But because I agree. I love the magic bit. It gives his character some depth. It's the out of place humor that that didn't work all the time. Some of it did, but some of it didn't. There's that one bit where they're talking when he goes, "What's a syllable?" Loved it.
Well, and there's part of it too where it's. I think I noticed the problem with when you say he's in his own movie, and he is delivering the funny lines. He's delivering the funny lines, but he's kind of literally playing off nobody.
Yeah,
and you kind of need that bounce back. Like I would have loved to see him and another character that was like together. It would be magic. Like I saw that sort of between Billy and Goodnight. I saw a bit of that play back and forth, which was kind of nice, and that's sort of what he needed for some of those to land, I think.
I would have liked a character that was more of a clear mentorship that Chico and Chris had in the original film, where initially, like, Chris doesn't want Chico to join their band at all. He's this brash young Mexican kid.
I don't think it's that Chris doesn't want him to. He doesn't think he thinks he's too green. It's more. I think he respects what the kid wants to do, but he's prepared to be a mentor. But he needs the kid to be ready to be mentored. Yeah,
and he's a harsh mentor. You know, he gives those humiliating moments to the kid. Yeah. But kudos to the kid, he doesn't give up. Yeah. Like the first time he storms off after being humiliated with that slapping the gun scene, the claps, and try to draw and grab his gun, capture the gun between the clap. And it was a neat scene. And then, of course, he gets drunk and he embarrasses himself again later on.
I saw something funny during that scene. I mean, I was watching it and I'm like, you can count how many times they reshot this scene because of the scratches on the bar.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because every time he put his gun down, it scratched across the bar. And there's like 8 or 9 of them, scratches from previous takes in the bar.
Oh, no way.
That explains that.
I didn't catch that. That's clever. Nice eye.
Yeah, no, I don't know why I spotted. I saw the scratches. I'm like, those are from the previous takes.
Yeah. So, yeah, I kind of miss that within the film because we really get to see Chico grow as a character. Yeah. Along the way.
And we don't get that character in this movie at all.
Yeah. And, you know, he could become Chris or like Chris and the others in the band, or he can go another way. And he chooses that other way. You know, yes, he helps defend the town,
but he realizes it's not what he really wants.
But yeah, he realizes he's not what he really wants, and he falls in love with Petra and stays after they've rescued these townsfolk.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that ending line too. Is they won, we never win, we always lose.
Yeah,
yeah.
The only people that won this was
the gunfighters. Yeah, the gunfighters were.
Yeah,
it's such a tough life. The two characters, Lee and Goodnight, Ethan Hawke's character, Ribishow, and their commentaries on PTSD, and that could be one of the first films ever to address the subject.
I think it may have been,
I mean, Magnificent Seven from 1960 would have been before they even coined the term.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a combination of two things. It is PTSD, but it's also his own mortality because he's getting old, and he's like, there was a time I could have gotten all 3 flies. Yeah. He knows as a gunfighter, his days are absolutely numbered.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, I think that they took what that fear of dying and fear of losing his edge, and I mean it did have undertones of PTSD, but yeah, they certainly turned it into more of a PTSD problem in the remake.
Oh yeah, by that point that was just last year. We have a term, we know what that medical condition is, and you can address that in a more substantial way. But I do like that they acknowledged this in 1960 when they didn't have a term for this.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
We've already post World War II, and you've got lots of soldiers going through this at this point.
Exactly.
So it should. It didn't resonate with American audiences, but I'm sure there is, in some levels, that character did.
Well, there was a certain kind of, I think, a lack of compassion in that point. The term for PTSD at that time was "get over it."
Yeah,
really.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, it really was. This actually puts out one of the big differences between these two movies that I saw as a missed opportunity in the remake. Is in the original, nobody really saw how afraid Lee or Robert Vaughn's character was.
Yeah,
right? Like he kept it very, very well hidden. Nobody noticed it.
Yeah, he didn't have that partner character kind of help him off those edges sometimes.
That's right. And in the remake, Pratt did notice. He knew something was wrong, and it never came to fruition. Right, it turned into.
I think initially
a
Pratt just
confrontation.
thinks he's a coward.
Yeah,
because it's not like he knows this guy. He knows the legend of this guy, and he thinks that maybe that's all it is.
But it got and I still think it got wasted because there's that great scene where he confronts him and hands him the rifle and says, "Show us how to shoot," right? And then he does, and it kind of puts paid to that, but you can still see the suspicions in him, but that never goes anywhere, right? And because he says he knows there's still something wrong.
Yeah, you don't quite get that payoff.
That's right, and
that you should.
That's right, and he never talks to Sam about it and says, "Hey, you know what? I don't know about your friend. There's something wrong there." It's Billy Rox is covering it up and helping him out. Right?
Yeah, you wind up having the Goodnight and Sam wind up having a discussion, and I guess Sam had been noticing, but you never really see that acknowledged during the film. No. It really feels like that. You're right. I think that scene would have been better served if it had been Pratt's character.
I think it really should have been Goodnight and Faraday, and it should have been that whole thing where like Faraday is treating this like a lark. Yeah, like it should have been Faraday, and it should have been Goodnight, and it could have been this whole thing where Faraday's just treating it like it's just a happy. He's experienced too much joy with this, and Goodnight could be like, honestly, there comes a point where it's going to break a man. I don't care how good you think you are, son. It's going to break you. Yeah,
there's been too much blood, too much death. The same lines he basically said to Sam, but saying to the character who needs to hear them.
Yeah.
Faraday definitely needed to hear those. Or, I mean, his sense of humor was covering up his own insecurities, and again, they don't address those either. Right? Like there's character development.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, even the minor characters you feel in the original, you get a sense of who these people are.
Even the townspeople.
Yeah, even the townspeople. Like Harry, he doesn't get a lot of time, but. You know why he's there. He thinks there's a big payday being hidden from him. Not this $20 that he's been promised, but there must be gold or something in this town other than a way station for these bandits just to fuel back up. And that's really all it is. They're taking what little these townspeople have while they're off doing other bandito stuff and wintering in the mountains.
Yeah.
And I do like their desperation. Like, that's why they keep coming back, even after the Magnificent Seven kind of scare them off a couple of times.
They have nowhere else to go.
They've got nowhere else to go. There's a desperation there.
Yeah, and that works so much better than this greed-focused plotline that we have in the remake. Right? Because these guys are bad out of necessity, not bad out of desire.
Yeah, in fact, when they're Calvera's men have that moment where they lure the seven out and then get into the town, he could just kill them all.
Yeah.
And especially, he's lost a lot of men to these guys already.
A lot of men.
And he is really merciful. Like, he always leaves a little bit left for these townsfolk to survive because he's smart. They need to keep coming back. They need these guys to keep producing and not go away. So he always leaves a little bit to the town so they can continue on, but just enough to continue on and keep that cycle going.
Yeah, and Eli Wallach, I never fail to enjoy him when he's on the screen.
Yeah, he was really good, and it's amazing the restraint he has and actually lets these guys go. He understands why the townsfolk did this.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they would have been punished for it, but
not to the extreme that we see in this remake.
I still was baffled. It's like, okay, you sent them off away and then gave the guns back to them after they left the town. I'm like, you guys kept coming back. Why wouldn't you think these guys wouldn't?
I don't know. It's weird. It's that misunderstanding because I think he thought they're just guns for hire. Because he says at one point to Steve McQueen, we're in the same business. And Steve McQueen says only as competitors.
Yeah.
But he believes that they're just about the money. So he thinks if they don't get paid, they'll just go away.
Yeah.
Right.
So this actually does still have the theme of money attached to it.
Yes. Yeah. It certainly does. And I mean, they even have that great dialogue when they get the guns back about whether they're going to stay or leave. Right, and I mean, Harry says, "I'm leaving. I'm done with this. I'm not going to die for this anymore." Like I
would have liked a moment where we see him heading the other way and see that moment of God damn it, and turns around.
I love those moments in movies.
Yeah, I do too. I miss that moment, and maybe it was just because it's cheaper than having to shoot him in a scene. But I think that scene would have been just that enough to see him turn around, and because it says a lot about his character when he turns around.
It does, but
I don't think it says quite as much when he shows up to get shot.
Yeah, but I mean, but Goodnight's character does the same thing.
Yeah,
that's true.
Right, and you don't see his decision to come back; he just shows up. Right, but. Again, this is one of the things that they did do right and it's always Ethan Hawke, whose character, he's Goodnight's character, who always seems to have the great moments. When he comes back, he's going, they have the devil's breath, they have a Gatling gun, they have a goddamn Gatling gun, right? It served a purpose, right? It wasn't just him coming back to the rescue. He had seen something, he knew he had to go back. It showed a motivation.
And it was this moment to overcome
his fear and his PTSD, right? It just works so well.
Yeah.
It did, yeah. I thought that was a good moment
because he also understands they've brought a Gatling gun. They're not here to just get these townspeople to cower. They're here to slaughter everyone.
Yeah, and when we get to that final conflict, it's not a bunch of little conflicts like in the other one, escalating conflicts that they had in the original film. This is one big battle.
Yeah.
It's all or nothing. They're not going to know. There's no running back. I mean, I do like the traps they set up. The final conflict is set up pretty well for both films.
Yes. In terms of action, the remake was really good.
Yeah.
I mean, the action scenes did what they're supposed to do. They got the heart rate racing and they were entertaining.
But it takes a lot longer to get there, and especially when you're not enjoying the cast in those quiet moments and they're just not coming together. I mean, I enjoyed individual performances. They don't gel as a unit. I mean, I particularly enjoyed D'Onofrio for all sorts of reasons.
Yes.
His character's insane.
Yes.
He is insane. And I think that was he was just a joy to watch.
That squeaky voice that he kind of cribs from other Western movies of that older guy. And he's shooting for the stars, and it was paying off.
It was totally paying off.
Like that voice parodied by like the old man panning for gold.
Yeah,
that's what he was doing.
That slightly whistly voice.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it shows what a great actor this man really is. And I mean, we were watching it, and he first came on the screen, and I said, I actually said I fucking loved Vincent D'Onofrio in everything I see him in. The movie can be shit, but he's amazing. And Belle goes, "That's Vincent D'Onofrio?" She freaked out. She's like, "I didn't even recognize him."
I think the only time I haven't super enjoyed him was Jurassic World. He feels a bit generic villain. Another one he did with Chris Pratt.
With Chris Pratt. But I really enjoyed. Like, he just shows up out of nowhere taking out these guys.
Yeah,
these assholes.
Yeah, and like for an old dude, he's moving and It's just quick and with what he's doing. It's not like he's lightning fast like a young person.
He's lumbering,
but he's very confident in his movements.
He's powerful.
He's this powerful lumbering guy. So he'll hit some guy, and in the same movement with one fist, he's grabbing their gun with the other one out of his holster.
He's efficient. He's
very efficient, and then stabbing them like he doesn't have wasted movement, and I think that's really interesting to see in this older character.
Yeah,
of the charm of the one thing, as Chris Pratt says, I think that bear was wearing human clothes.
Yeah, that was one of the best one-liners in the movie. Absolutely, yeah. It was one that actually worked. Yeah,
because I'm like, oh my god, that's exactly what I'm seeing.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Yeah. Right. And I love how he says that the first line when he comes into the screen, lumbering there with the bloodstream, he says, "Those guys broke a rock on my head. Didn't break my head with a rock. They broke a rock on my head." Right. It's semantics, but it works really well. It's very clear is that this guy was mad that they broke the rock on his head, used his head to break a rock. Not that they hit him, but that they used his head to break a rock.
Yeah. Exactly. And then when he takes them both out, they have Ethan Hawke going, "Wow, those guys weren't famous for very long, were they?"
Yeah, again, those moments where it works really, really well. This was one of those moments for sure.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen, there's only one thing I would have added to it is, I can't remember, the female lead, just more of her reaction to this whole thing. I'm like, I'm surrounded by insane people. Like, just to have her be like, I get it, I just like, have I done the right thing?
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that again should have worked really well in this movie is showing how these characters who are typically alone, have no roots, no enemy. They're a bit of dialogue in the original where they're talking about how they have no enemies, they have no roots, they have nobody, no responsibilities, they have nothing, right? And how it starts, you start thinking it's a good thing until you realize that you have nothing, right? And that could have translated really well over to here to have these very big, larger than life characters. Is you spend so much time in solitude by yourself that you do become a little bit crazy, right? But that was never really developed. And
well, that's the problem with the remake in general. Like, there's some nuggets of greatness in there that never go anywhere because, honestly, I think the movie just suffers from political correctness.
Well,
in a lot of ways, especially that ending.
It could have. Well, I say it could have been addressed. These guys could have been those people that just kind of saw past all that bullshit, and that would have solved that problem. But part of it was, you've got a bunch of people all kind of itching for screen time in the least efficient of ways. Whereas in the original, I felt a lot of people got their due, and it's sort of, they did everything with the characters, like the Charles Bronson character, Bernardo. He gets sort of, they show who he is in like very few moments, but very efficient. And he also gets adopted by this trio of boys. And I missed
that in the remake. I really wish that had been left in there.
Yeah, it really helps elevate a character who doesn't get a lot of time.
Yeah.
And you get a good sense of who he is and how he's the compassionate one within the band.
Yeah, and you have Britt, who's like James Coburn. He's always shown kind of either laying down with his hat on, like always napping, always like kind of, he's very lazy and efficient when he does,
he's a professional soldier. You sleep when you can because you may not know when you're going to get to sleep again. Right?
Yeah.
That's who he was.
Very calm, very professional, and
very quiet. He's got 11 lines.
Yeah. Coburn, being a big fan of Seven Samurai, got to play his favorite character within the films. So,
and he used aspects of that character.
Oh, absolutely. So
you got, but these bits they show you each and every one. But I think that's what was really kind of missing is they sacrificed it for just some punchy dialogue when it could have been a quiet moment that would have shown you everything.
I never got a sense of who Vasquez was.
Nope.
No, and he survives.
Yeah.
I really didn't understand a lot about Red Harvest either. You get a little bit, but not a lot. Another character that survives, and I had to note that some of the minorities, most of the minorities, with the exception of Billy Rocks, survived this film. And outside of Denzel, they were the least developed characters. It didn't make a lot of sense.
As I was watching it, I'm watching it going, you know what? You've killed off all of your big names except for Denzel, and the characters that you did any development on.
Yeah,
and then you have these two background characters who
I'd actually thought until they showed up, I thought they had died.
Me too.
Because I'm like, I blink and they died, and then they showed up. I'm like, oh, that's how inconsequential they were.
You know what? I also wanted another scene.
Although I did like the Red Harvest with his sniping arrows.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
But I also would have liked the one scene where, and they sort of allude to it, they just start the beginning of a scene that should have been in the movie, where Red Harvest just says, "I'm hungry." And then Vincent D'Onofrio's like, "You speak English? You little shit."
And then he says, "We got a lot to talk about.
We got a lot to talk about."
And then
where is that scene? That would have made, like, when we're talking about how they get past shit,
and
that would have been perfect.
That's the scene. That's the scene that needs to be there.
Yeah,
absolutely. Because these two are going to be a direct conflict with each other. They should be.
Yeah. Well, and they allude to that. There's that one scene, and again, a good scene, where Red Harvest says something in Comanche or whatever language it is he's speaking, and D'Onofrio's character says, "What did he say?" And he said to stop staring at his hairline. And it's like, I love it, right? Because he knows who he is. He's a scalp hunter, right?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, they have this whole bit where D'Onofrio is going. He says the Lord's Prayer, like, I walk through the valley of death. Like, he's said to be a very pious man.
Yeah.
At some point, like, that could be part of the whole thing. Is like, I killed people. Like, that would be part of their interaction. Like, I know I've done some terrible shit.
Yeah. Oh, the religious
I have a
regret.
lot to atone for.
Yeah.
and that would have been part of that. Like, he doesn't have to like outright like beg forgiveness, but just have that thing where he's like, yeah, I understand.
Yeah, and those are
I'm probably going to hell.
Yeah, and those are the differences between a fun popcorn movie and something with real depth.
Yeah.
And they went for popcorn.
Yeah, and you could have had sort of a similar scene with like Faraday and the Mexican character. I can't remember his name.
Vasquez, yeah.
Vasquez, which that's what I'm saying. Like just a few missed moments. You know what? Like maybe 2 less dynamite explosions, and just put in scenes, and this would be a great movie.
And short. You know, that final action scene could have been shorter. It could have been a good 5-10 minutes shorter.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'll be honest, by the end you're going, okay, yeah, I'm numb to it now.
Yeah, it did become exhausting after a while. You almost needed a break from it. And that's what I liked about the initial one is they do run off and reconvene and kind of come out with a new plan of attack. There's this cat and mouse thing going on.
Ooh, when Chico just saunters into the camp.
I mean, great tension.
Oh, yeah. I'm like... I had to make note of that
I couldn't figure out what was
Calvera's got
happening.
so many new soldiers that he doesn't know who they are.
Yes.
He literally doesn't recognize the guy who had a gun on him the day before.
Yeah.
No, the guy who's lighting his cigar.
Yeah, love that. And I love how cool Chico was about it, too. He's like, he just went with it, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to run the trailer for the remake, and we'll talk some more and wrap this sucker up.
Man carries a gun, he tends to use it.
Dan, you dead? Pity. I had just ordered a drink from that man.
Took a job looking for some men to join me.
Is it difficult?
Impossible.
How many you got so far?
You and me?
Who's she?
We work for her.
Good Lord.
That's right.
That man murdered my husband.
I want something. I take it.
He will take everything we have.
So you seek revenge?
I seek righteousness. But I'll take revenge.
I'll need more than a few to help us fight.
What a bunch of misfits we are.
You know how to shoot that thing? I'm good.
So am I.
He's local, my friend.
Oh, we're good. We got a Mexican. I sense we are bonding. Oh. We got a 7.
He's got an army.
And they'll be murdered
by the world's greatest lover.
Why are you here? Fighting someone else's fight.
These people deserve their lives back.
Just make sure we're fighting the battle in front of us, not the battle behind.
Every man's got the right to choose where he dies.
We have nowhere else to go, so...
You ain't never seen a soldier like me. 1, 2, 3, I'm a vigilante. 4, 5, 6, kiss that ass goodbye. When I pull the gun, then somebody gotta die.
What's the plan?
I've always wanted to blow something up.
Is that a plan?
I'ma put your lights out. We can do this right now. I'm ready.
How'd we do?
I think we killed them all.
All right, that was The Magnificent Seven from 2016. Even the trailer kind of evokes kind of meh.
Well, yeah, when you listen to the music, and it's pop music, and sometimes that works for a period piece, and sometimes it doesn't. I don't think it does for this one. I mean, they did have some of those great Western orchestral pieces in the movie, but when you're advertising the movie, it's obviously there to titillate you and draw you in, making you think that this is uber modern rock and roll Western. And to a certain extent it is. But it doesn't, like the rest of the movie, it doesn't quite hit the mark.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going for action and an action ensemble, you really don't have to look any further than Young Guns to see how taking a more poppy look at and applying it to a Western can work.
Oh, yeah.
But again, all really comes down to chemistry.
True.
It does. And I mean, I think these actors have chemistry. Right, I mean, there's
some of them.
Some of them do. I mean, they're capable actors. Every single one of them.
Yeah,
so there should be chemistry.
Yeah, I keep seeing strong individual performances in this film, and I think the standouts here are Ethan Hawke and Vincent D'Onofrio,
and the Billy Rocks.
Yeah,
I mean, for a character who had very little dialogue, he made it very clear who he was.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, and his relationship to Goodnight and his relationship to everybody else was actually quite well defined.
Yeah,
right. But they didn't do that with everybody.
No,
right. And I'm sorry, but I have to blame the director. I don't think the actors.
Yeah, well, especially when your two leads don't feel like they're gelling and don't gel with anybody else within the group.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like some of the middle cast, it seems to be getting along just fine.
Yeah,
and are giving the better performances. So I don't know, something wasn't working there. And yeah, maybe, and you'd think somebody like Antoine Fuqua, who's did Training Day, he could, I don't know, maybe he just didn't get the script he kind of approved that he wanted. I don't know, maybe he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe again, you could have
But he was playing it safe on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's another bit too where you can edit something and it doesn't quite, like, because you're missing bits that would actually make things make more sense. But again, you got to figure it out. It's if they don't gel, either make them antagonistic so that there's something going on, or I don't know what else you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would have, like Sam said, I think I would have sacrificed a little bit of the final battle for character, but there are times in this movie I feel like it's really sluggish.
Yes.
And that's the time where you need to start filling that space instead of these awkward little jokey moments. That's where you could fill the space with a little more of the internal conflict within the group.
And they did it so well in the original. There's that great scene where they're doing the trick with the mugs. Mm-hmm. Right, with the villagers. Mm-hmm. There's some great scenes with the villagers, right, that they tried to translate to the remake that didn't work. Like the scene where they're trying to teach them how to shoot the guns or shoot the rifles, and there's the scenes where they're talking about their lives, like they're actually relating to the community, right? And that feeds into a discussion that Chris and Vin have about how they're starting to think about how nice it would be to stay and plant roots and stuff like that, because they've actually, for the first time in their lives, have actually gotten to know the community, and they've actually ingrained themselves into the community as
they're really
people.
Bonding with those people, whereas they are pretty much mocking them during the training. It's like, you go make me eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And they're trying for humor instead of pathos, and this movie requires more pathos.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm like, you need to give them a reason to keep defending this town.
Yeah.
And that was actually a major line within the original movie is prove you're worth fighting for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was, I think that was Vin who said that.
Yeah.
And that would have been a very powerful line from Chris Pratt's character, Faraday, as well. And
because his character would be exactly the type of character to say something like that as well. Right? But instead we get this bit where he's calling out Good night.
Oh, actually, no. I think that was Chico who said
it was Chico. Yes.
Oh, he had that great speech when they finally get in town and they're not greeted.
Yeah,
and everybody's hiding from them. That was actually pretty good.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Chico was a great character.
Yeah, he says what everybody's kind of thinking.
True. What's funny is what I found really weird is he gets all mad that they didn't show up till they sounded the alarm. But I'm like going, why are you upset? An alarm got sounded and they came. I mean, if they were really cowards, they would go the other way if the alarm gets sounded.
There is that too, right?
They're kind of having the opposite reaction to the alarm, aren't they?
Yeah, they're going to the fire, guys.
Yeah, unless the bells are supposed to be the all clear and that it's okay to come, but that was.
But that does say a little bit about Chico too, because he came from a town like this. Yeah. You learn that very late in the film. But he's very much was one of these people at some point in his life.
Well, it's sort of, they do mention that he came from like a town of farmers, and he is kind of looking down on this with derision. And then when he falls in love with Petra, he's like going, well, no, I could still do this life. I know what it's about. I'm not out of my depth.
And he clearly realizes that he doesn't want the gunfighting life. He wants those roots and he wants to settle down. And
he's cocky, and he even gets shot for it.
Yeah. And that's the thing. One of the biggest differences between these movies is the fact that there's an actual there's your main story, and then you've got your underlying story, a story about these men.
Yeah,
right? Not about what they're doing, but about them.
Yeah, you really do see personal growth within pretty much each and every one of them.
Yeah, basically everybody arcs. And in this remake...
Some of them are pretty basic, because, I mean, you only have so much time, but there really aren't any arcs. And what little gets started isn't sufficiently done in the remake to make you convinced that they are going through an arc to begin with.
Yeah. There's one
Faraday has no arc at all.
None whatsoever.
He's a flatline.
Yeah. The only arc that really works for me is Goodnight's.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But his was also the easiest because they established that he's got the PTSD and he overcomes it, right? And his death in the hail of bullets is that sense of closure for him, right? Or for his character at least. But none of the other characters have that. I mean,
I guess, Britt in the original film, Coburn's character doesn't have much of an arc either, but he's just that calming force of nature. He
just does what he does.
He just does what he does. He's there, and then he's gone like the wind. Yeah. Back to napping.
Like I say, they said like he's got 11 lines. He doesn't speak much.
At least you understand his character.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, his character knew who he was, and there was no need for him to grow.
Yeah, and his Billy Rocks is very much the same. You understand what he is. Kind of a ninja, really.
Yeah.
They had two ninjas, him and Red Harvest.
Yeah.
Exactly. But Billy, for me, Billy doesn't really need an arc. His journey is about his experience with Goodnight. Like at a certain point, he's drinking because he thinks Goodnight's gone. Because now he's like, damn, what happens now?
He does facilitate Goodnight's arc.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and helps him through it.
Yeah, but Billy Rocks is also the only character who I think I said it earlier too. Is he's the only one where you actually sort of see how he relates to every other character in the group.
Mm-hmm.
He's the only one where you can see how he relates to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
He does it very well, just sort of by his reactions to each person. Right, and I mean that's kudos to him for his performance with that because he makes it work with just body language and facial expressions. We keep coming back to it, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse. But I think we needed more of that.
Yeah. No, I suspect this film also suffered from one-upmanship and sometimes, and I think D'Onofrio was the one who won.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But kind of looking back on it, I think I found the major flaw at it when you're talking about one-upmanship. We talk about the original film, whereas the one-upmanship between Yul Brynner and Steve McQueen, that's all well and good. But at the end of the day, that movie contained more people than them, and that's what happened. Like, you got the villagers, you got the interaction. I think in this movie, you only have really the female lead out of that entire damn town they even talk to.
Yeah, and let's talk about her because there's another person who actually has an arc.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She kind of goes away in the second act she's still kind of a badass. She's the one that leaves the village to go find help. And it's more of the village doesn't even know about it, where in the other one they get some volunteers, they get their town money together. She's the one who facilitates this because she thinks she's in a town of cowards. She's lost and she lost her husband at the beginning of the film.
She's got nothing there anymore, really.
Yeah, that motivates her. She still likes her town, but
she's also got nothing to lose.
She's got nothing to lose, and really, why are you defending a town that doesn't want to defend itself? But we do see her grow as a character. We see her really pay attention and take to firing guns and things. And the only thing that kind of holds her back is the fact that she's female and she's not being taken too seriously. Another thing that would happen in the 1860s or 1880s.
And the other thing about it too, I have a slight change to like that kind of perception. Like, they didn't take to her because she was a woman, but the thing about her shooting, she probably could have learned that. I mean, if you're in a rural area, you're going to learn to shoot. Because she says, I had a father. Yeah. Like, my dad taught me to shoot. It wasn't a thing.
Yeah, no, her character makes more sense. That was something about the Mexican village that bothered me, is this village had nothing. They didn't have any weapons, and they couldn't afford to buy them. It was cheaper for them to buy soldiers.
Yeah. And that's probably true. It was probably very true. And and this brings up something that worked well for me, and then fizzled is the scene where she's practicing shooting at that stump across the river there, and there's a
nailing it, by the way,
and nailing it. Absolutely, she's a great shot, and there's a great bit of dialogue between her and Faraday, right? And I mean, there's sort of they kind of hint that there's something going to be happening between them,
and then
right?
Nothing,
and then nothing.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah. And
that's something that was happening with Chico and Petra, which starts out kind of antagonistic and then grows into something. Yeah. And you think Faraday, and he even says you're going to get killed by the world's greatest lover, and he gives her a couple of winks and nothing really happens.
But the world's greatest lover, I sort of assumed when he was talking about that, I expected like in that saloon scene, he's just playing cards. He's supposed to be catting around. That's what, if he wants to have that line, that's what that character has to do. Mm-hmm. But I mean, even if they had a bit where he comes on to her and just like, no, I had a husband, I'm a widow now, but I'm not looking for anything else. Even if she rebuffs him, at least that feels like that
closure on it.
Story has been dealt with.
I mean, I like the fact that they didn't.
Yeah, there's a lot of setups and not a lot of anything else.
Yeah, I like the fact that they didn't like stuff the obligatory love story in there.
Yeah,
because I will be honest, one of the few things about the original I didn't like was that love story.
It didn't work. No,
it made me uncomfortable because she was so Molly, blatant, just needy, and it felt really out of place. It was the only thing in the movie that felt out of place to me.
Well, to me, what bothered me the most is
I like the romance, but sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I like the romance, just the way it was handled I didn't like.
Oh, I hated the entire setup and how it kind of came to be, because here's the deal. They have a whole point where he grabs her and he puts her over his shoulder and puts her on a horse and takes her someplace else. And so he takes her down, so they're hiding. Like, they say that they don't trust us, that we're going to rape them. I'm like, you grabbed her and put her on a horse. I don't know many stories where this ends well for the woman. It really doesn't. She has a reason to believe that you guys are brutes. You've just proved it.
No, actually, he disproved it because she started attacking him. He got under control and took her back without doing anything to her. He didn't harm her. He did not rape her. So he disproved that.
So kidnapping somebody is fine. That's disproving people not doing something to you.
I think there was... That initial scene's pretty awkward in general, but I mean the point of it was to say yes, because they had this big celebration and there's no women in this town, and they do take note of that, and that is something, you know, the fathers and husbands are saying, don't trust these men.
Yeah. But I'm not going to say...
just like the men that are coming
I'm not going to say it's a disproof. Like, say I go outside and somebody grabs me and puts me in their car. Just because they drop me at my house doesn't mean they are somebody I can trust.
Well, no, and that's not
you know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying, but you've ignored the first part of that conflict where she attacked him, and he keeps saying, I keeps pushing her away and saying, I just want to talk, I just want to talk. He was defending himself when he grabbed her.
And at the same time,
he ran after her. He didn't have to do that.
And did say he wanted to talk.
And at the same time, she's withholding crucial information. These people need to know to help this town and these villagers.
But she doesn't know who this guy is.
Oh, well, of course not.
No, and I understand her motivation as well.
She knows more about him than he knows about her.
Well, they haven't. Yeah, I don't know. They haven't proved that they're trustworthy yet. They're hired guns.
And you know what? But as a hired gun, and I saw somebody running away from me, I would fucking chase them too.
As a hired gun?
Absolutely. When you're defending a town and somebody runs away from you...
Are they a spy?
Are they a spy?
Yeah.
Are they somebody that's going to kill you? Damn right I'm going to chase them.
Well, then I'll get that too.
When he caught her, he didn't know she was a woman.
When they talk about distrust, I'll just make one more point. When you were talking about Eli Wallach's character, where he says that they'll just go away because he thinks they'll just get paid, maybe that's the whole perception. They're there to get paid, and they don't know if they can trust them.
Yeah, and I don't blame her for his
there
distrust.
Should be distrust.
And your argument is not invalid, but there's other factors that we had that have to be spoken about there too.
I know, but from her perspective, if somebody's chasing me, I will attack somebody.
But there's a scene right after this when Petra and the other women are returned back to town, and they're feeding these soldiers this big feast. And it's Bernardo, Charles Bronson's character, who takes note that what these villagers are actually eating is they're eating very modestly and very little. And they realize they're taking the best of what they have. And they go out and feed the rest of the villagers this feast that was initially meant for them.
Yeah.
And that says a lot to sell that these guys are really here to help this village and these folks and prove themselves to the women who definitely have the most distrust about them.
And I think that's when that changes.
Distrust. And that's where the scene comes together. I think it starts off a bit
That's
clumsy,
where I felt that changed.
and it was very much needed. And it's great that kind of comes around. But I mean, it starts off in a very awkward and uncomfortable place.
Yeah.
As our discussion gets heated about it, and from different perspectives, and it does, and maybe that awkwardness is important for that closure later on.
Yeah, and it is important because they talk. Petra and Chico talk about it as well. She says, "I didn't know what." And to your point, I didn't know what you were going to do to me, right? So that's why I attacked you. Right, and so he did the only thing that he could, which was restrain her and take her to town. So,
which again is when you're the recipient of it, it's fearful. You can't
make signals.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Right. Like as a recipient of it, it's bad. But I mean, when Steve McQueen takes her and puts her back on the horse properly, I think at that point she's like, okay, because at one point he's about to like push her butt back on the horse, but thinks better of it and walks away. Yeah. That was a subtle moment, which I thought was brilliant. And I liked it.
And there's some nice subtle moments. Actually, the fact that the town wasn't armed, I quite liked. So every time they killed some soldiers, they took their weapons and then gave it to the town to learn how to use. Yeah. And every time more soldiers died, they'd get more weapons. I'm like, this is brilliant.
Yeah, it is.
That was another important aspect that was kind of missing from it. But, maybe that's the difference between a small village in Mexico versus a small town in the United States, Kansas, or wherever the heck
U.S.
they were.
was entirely built on that whole thing, the right to bear arms. Yeah. They had a civil war. A lot of people fought like with guns they just had.
Yeah.
So it's already a completely different dynamic.
Yeah, and it'd have to be. But I did really miss that.
Yeah.
Because it was
a really nice device.
Yeah, it was a cool device, and you see the villagers grow.
And it also
in defending themselves.
And it points out to the fact like how they actually are in true and real peril, and these gunfighters are needed because I mean they could go buy guns, but they can't do anything with them.
Yeah, they're not trained soldiers. Yeah.
And that's what sort of bothered me about all these farmers not being able to use a gun, like not even to like, I don't know, shoot a gopher or like a coyote that was going after your cattle or like something like that. That's a little bit of what bothered me about that.
That's true, yeah. You'd think they'd actually be fairly decent shots, and like you said, just for pest control. They should be fairly decent at shooting moving targets. Maybe that's what the problem was. They were stationary.
Because they're in. I think they're somewhere in Northern California because there's a gold mine.
Yeah.
Right? In the mountains. So you have coyotes, you have wolves, you're going to have hunting. So you're right. The fact that it's a very weak point in the script where these guys don't know how to shoot at all. They're that bad.
Yeah, I think it could have been a whole thing where they're bad at shooting at something that looks like a human target. Yeah. They don't want to shoot at something because I think doesn't one of the guys say like the flesh is flesh is weak, the mind is willing but the flesh is weak. I'm only used to shooting at things that can't shoot back, indicating they can shoot other things.
Yeah.
But being just terribly bad at it.
And maybe it's that connect of like, well, I'm going to be killing another human being. There's definitely that mental aspect. Again, they don't do a good job getting that across.
Yeah. I know. There's just so much richness in the original.
Yeah, there's an implausibility of the ineptness where it's just done for comedy's sake.
Yeah. And poorly.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's not overly funny. It's you kind of go.
It's there.
It's a little bit of a chuckle.
There to set up that scene between Faraday and Goodnight.
Yeah,
right. That's its sole purpose is for Faraday to challenge Goodnight on his suspicions. Yeah, no, it just didn't work.
And what was it? There was that one scene with Billy, and he's trying to show them how to use knives, and it goes nowhere.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. Granted, Billy's doing these amazing knife moves, and he's like, you take the knife, you throw the knife. It's easy.
Stab,
just as
slash.
Stab, slash, blah, blah. And he's doing all these crazy knife moves, and then everybody just turns their back and walks away.
Yeah.
They're already halfway gone by the time he's finished.
Yeah, he's like, see, easy. Where are you going? Get back. And it's really is pretty funny because I would have probably gone, it's not that easy. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, throwing knives is hard. I would have you know what? I think that would have been a more solid joke if all these adults walked away and it was just a little kid just sitting there going like, hello.
And that would have been nice to do. I didn't.
That would have been a great place to tie in the whole bit with the 3 kids and adopting.
I mean, it doesn't have to be the same analogies, but I did miss that as well.
Yeah.
Like that, he would have been an interesting, because he's a hard character, and I could see that being very entertaining to children.
Yes,
to watch.
Because his knives are flashy, guns are fine, but a knife
and to
as a
seeing
kid?
this guy who's used to being a soldier and a fighter and whatnot, trying to relate to 2 children, the awkwardness of that scene would probably have been very delightful.
Yes.
It would have been great. And you could have had like just this tiny child who survived the whole battle being like, I'll come find you guys when I grow up.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, because the kids gave another great piece there to the pathos of the original movie when Renado's dying.
There's hero worship, and they're misunderstanding their own towns, their own parents.
Yeah, and he says, "Look, there's your fathers. They're out there fighting.
Yeah,
right. Look to your fathers," and it's just an incredibly powerful.
Yeah,
he's explaining to the kids that your fathers are not cowards.
Yeah.
No.
Like,
they just didn't know anything else.
Yeah, they came to us to help them fight back.
Yeah.
That's not cowardice. No.
Well, it's also the other...
That's fucking smart is what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah, right? Let's get somebody else to die.
Yeah.
But I love the perception of how he talks about, like, yeah, no, we're just fighting battle after battle, but, like, what courage is, like, every day, slugging it out all the time, not giving up. That's where the courage is.
Yeah, working those fields. And, I mean, most of these soldiers... within the original film, most of these hired guns, they didn't have the courage to settle down and find a real life. We actually see that within Vin's character.
Yeah.
He was offered a clerk's job at a grocery store. He just couldn't be that.
No.
He didn't want to be that. He was willing to take a shitty payday to defend a town that might get him killed over a steady paycheck. Doing something he's going to be bored to do for the rest of his life.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually a really great kind of funny line there where he's saying, well, how much will it pay? And he's like, well, less than a clerk's job? Great line, right? It's because it's true. At $20 is only going to, it's a one-time payment, right? The clerk's job is going to pay him ongoing. But he would have been miserable.
But you see the two
he
sides
didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
You also see the 2 sides of it at the beginning where Yul Brynner's talking like, why do people do it? And Yul's like, well... there's men who do it simply for the money, but there's others who aren't even in it for the money. They just love the danger. And then you have that other scene where they're talking about whether they should leave or not because the farmers have decided, well, we're done. We don't want to fight anymore. And he's like, they talk about what they have. And he's like, yeah, well, we have this and this and this, but we also have no prospects, no wife, no children.
Yeah, I mean, we do get a much better sense of each man's motivation in this. Some just for the adventure, others because there's a price on their heads and they're safer with these guys. Some because
they've got nothing better to do. That was Coburn's character was literally he had nothing better to do.
Some thinking there's a better payday.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is some motivation. Again, Vasquez, he was price on his head. So it wasn't getting the price off his head. It meant one less bounty hunter looking for him.
Yeah.
And that was worth it for him. Chris Pratt was doing it because Chisholm bought his horse back.
Yeah.
And that was his payment, was like paying him back for the horse by doing this deed.
Yeah, I love the whole moment.
At least Chisholm had a personal vendetta in this.
For sure, but I love the moment when Chris Pratt's like, he doesn't want to do it. And he's like, fine, then leave me my horse. You can take off. And Chris Pratt's like, yeah, I'll stay.
Yeah, I think it's halfway through the battle. Have I paid you back for the horse yet? Yeah, you paid me back for the horse. Yeah, there's some good stuff there.
Yeah, but I mean, and they have motivations, but they're not as effective as the original.
Yeah, I think Goodnight is more pride than anything else.
Yeah.
He's got a reputation and he's trying to live up to it and still trying to deal with his own fears.
Yeah, he's trying to get rid of some demons. And plus, I think he also likes to... It seems like him and Chisholm are basically friends, so he wants to hang out with his buddy for a while.
Yeah. Well, I think there's that, and I think that they kind of play on... There's kind of a play on the James Coburn character where he's got nothing better to do, right? Because Billy and Goodnight are kind of an amalgam of James Coburn and Robert Vaughn's characters. Like they kind of took those two, mashed them together, and pulled them apart, so they both have aspects of those characters.
Yeah.
And it works really well. Like I said, they're by far the best dynamic in the whole movie.
Oh, absolutely. Love those two.
There was something else I was going to mention.
I like when he first meets he's like, oh, that's the person who hired us. And he strides right up, charming as can be, because he's like, yeah, she's probably freaked out being around these assholes, so I'm just going to be nice.
Yeah. Yeah, again, and I mean, Ethan Hawke, one of those great underrated actors who is phenomenal in almost everything he does. Yeah, he's one of those ones where very rare misses, and I love seeing him in these ensemble pieces because he's really good in them.
Yeah, when they were casting Doctor Strange, he was on the short list. He was actually the one I was rooting for, to be honest, because I could really see it. Not that I'm disappointed with who they wound up with. I mean, Cumberbatch is great, but I actually could see that more than Cumberbatch.
Especially after having seen this movie with sort of that gaunt look that he has.
Oh,
now.
yeah, and he could rock the Doctor Strange comic book mustache.
Yeah.
Which Cumberbatch can't. But, Marvel did fine with the catch they got, but I think Ethan Hawke would have been better in that role, personally.
Well, it's weird. Like when I saw Chris Pratt in this movie, I'm like going, is it because of Guardians, like a ragtag group of anti-heroes defending a group of people?
I think you just hit the nail on the head. I think they were trying to a certain extent, they were trying to capture that feel with this movie.
Well, he's the hot new action actor,
yeah,
right?
Well, there's that too, but yeah, this is exactly that. What Trish said is it's that whole ragtag bag of heroes, but they're very different heroes in this movie. And I think that's where it fails, is because they were trying to capture something that wasn't there.
Who was Rocket?
Who's Rocket? Oh my God. I'm trying to think of who was Rocket.
I'm guessing it was Red Harvest was Groot.
Yeah.
Red Harvest was Groot. I don't know. I think it was Vincent D'Onofrio was Rocket.
Yeah.
He survived a lot of stuff, as did Rocket.
Yes.
Very furry, as is Rocket. Just a lot bigger than Rocket.
There you go.
I want to talk about one more thing that worked really well in the remake, and because I'd almost forgotten about it, is there's a sort of a montage of them walking through the town, finding all their defensive points, and where they would set up this, and where they would do this, and how efficient they are. Like these guys, it shows how knowledgeable these guys are about what they do.
Yes,
and assessing the lay of the land so that they can make the most efficient use of all of their resources, and that was probably one thing that was missing in the original, is they didn't do that as well.
Yeah, it's not nearly as effective when they do have the townsfolk build a new wall and just cover points. I did like the trench warfare a little bit better, and how they utilized it and hid that with some of the tents and things like that, and planned for the forces to be split off and get flanked from another position. So they planned and figured out what the enemy approach might be and where those best vantage points were.
The only thing they didn't anticipate was the Gatling gun.
Yeah.
And in the story of where it is because it is a mine, then it makes. I love how they can justify it. There's a mine, so of course dynamite's going to be there.
Yeah.
So that actually made complete sense to me, which I liked.
Yes.
I hate it when it's sort of we suddenly have this stuff that there's no reason for it to be here, but they do.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, there's no holes in the story in the sense of why things happen the way they do. Like there's none. Like I said, the only flaw with this movie is the lack of the development of the characters. Beating that dead horse again, sorry.
Strange enough, in a Western. Oh, wait, and the one thing that we were talking about before we even started recording, the way Denzel had his gun in his holster backwards, where I was just trying to get my head around how that's easier to, pull.
Yeah.
Am I missing
I've been
something?
thinking about that, and actually, I think I can see how to do it, because
I think it's more of a cross.
Well, maybe.
Pull, right?
Well, no, because he was drawing them with. Well, no, it might be a crossover, but one of the reasons that I could see it working well backwards in his holster is the trigger guard won't snag on the holster.
Oh,
I guess.
Right, that's the only reason I can see for doing it that way, because I can't see him sort of twisting his wrist in to draw his guns.
See, and if you're doing
it doesn't feel natural.
No.
Yeah, I think if the holster had that gun a little bit further down on your hip, your thigh, then you actually do have that where your hand is right there, and it is an efficient action, but it's right up on his waist.
Yeah. Well, their holsters were already lower than what they would have worn at that time anyway, but
But yeah, I was like, I couldn't get it.
That's for nitpicky historians.
I couldn't quite get it. Oh, and speaking of, they were talking about in the original, again, the McQueen Brynner sort of going at loggerheads was the fact that Brynner had that fancy gun with iron handle.
Pearl handle.
And yeah, he was not happy about that.
Oh, just, everything nitpicky.
Absolutely everything.
Nitpicky. And that really put a strain on their relationship. They were good friends up until this movie, and it didn't really reconcile until he was passing away.
20 years later.
Passing away 20 years later, and actually thanked Yul Brynner for getting him on that film.
Well, that's the odd thing.
Because it did make him at that point.
Yeah, it moved him from an upcoming star to a star.
Yeah, he was a made man.
He went from that into Great Escape by the same director, right?
Yeah.
And that's the weird thing. We know so many movies where there's a lot of tension behind the scenes that you don't really see come up on the screen. You see like some electricity, but you don't know if it's antagonistic. But I don't know. Maybe Magnificent Seven just need a lot of people to hate each other more. I don't know.
Well, and I don't know. Maybe we don't hear about it unless it hits TMZ these days. Maybe there was some tensions, who knows, because God knows D'Onofrio's got a bit of a history.
Yeah. He was swinging for the fences, and God bless him for doing that. He's so watchable.
In many ways, he did save the movie for me.
Yes. Yeah. From the moment he walked on the screen, I looked forward to every time he was on screen.
Oh, the first words out of his mouth, I was like, what is he doing? And then I started like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for this. I'm not sure if I'm liking it, but it sure stands out.
and Sarsgaard actually isn't on the screen.
Oh,
hardly at all.
That was what I wanted to talk about.
Hardly at all he's on the screen, but man, that guy knows how to make me despise a human being. He's brilliant. I love it.
He was brilliant because you just loathed him all the way through this movie from the moment he was on the screen. But he looked like he was stoned through the whole movie. His lids were at half-mast all the way through, and it was very distracting, actually. He was good. I had no question that his performance itself was definitely... He chewed up the scenery.
Yeah. Right? And even during the big battle scenes, it's kind of... Take it in stride. Well, lost some more men. All right.
But that totally speaks to his character. Nothing around him is real. Like, these are just things that he uses.
Yeah. And he always had that Gatling gun in his pocket. He was always willing to sacrifice these men.
Yes, because he's that overconfident, knowing that he's always got something in his back pocket. When Faraday takes it out, I mean, the fact that he didn't cut and run just shows to how overconfident he is. I mean, this village has taken out his entire army. He's got 3 guys left, and he still rides into town.
And it was a massive amount of people he brought with him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're looking at, it wasn't no 40, it was hundreds.
You can take out a lot of people with dynamite, though. Yeah. There is that.
Yeah. But yeah, his arrogance was just astounding. Like the fact is, I'm still going into town. I only have 3 guys to back me up, but I'm going into town. I'm going to finish this. Right? And he was confident that he could finish it.
Mm-hmm. But it's weird. It's like sort of that narcissism and insanity that he has. Like at the very end, he's been shot. He's been shot again. He goes into the church going, oh, are you a God for him? Like begging for his life, thinking any of this is going to save his ass.
Yeah, the church he burned
me?
At the beginning of the film.
Yeah, exactly. Once it's burned down, I'm sorry.
And I love that juxtaposition.
Yeah,
right.
There's no forgiveness here.
Where it starts and ends in the church.
Yeah,
right. Like that's it's a perfect bookend. Right? That worked really well.
Yeah.
And it did do the one trope that I don't know, I never really tire of it, where the gun comes out and you hear a shot, but it's not from the gun you think it is. Yeah. The bad guy dies.
Yeah, I was starting to wonder if anybody was going to make it through the remake.
Yeah.
Well, not many people.
Well, the same number.
Same amount.
Same numbers in the first one.
Right? Yeah, it's the same amount. Yeah. There's nobody stays behind to be with these people. Nobody, and it's 2 characters that were the least developed.
Yeah,
within the film, and
one of those characters you wanted to see a lot more of. I mean, I wanted to see more of Red Harvest.
Oh, absolutely.
I certainly did with Red Harvest, absolutely. And Vasquez, you might as well have replaced him with somebody else at some point.
Yeah.
You could have.
He was so just not there, and it's a shame because okay, well, this guy was on the run and did this just to keep one bounty hunter from not hunting him. And, well, one, what did he do? And two, what are his qualifications?
And
what is he good at?
Yeah.
And he basically leaves town with Chisholm at the end. And I'm like, but this guy was just looking for you. What's your game plan here? And if Chisholm comes up against another lawman, what does he do? Mm-hmm. Like, is he going to
the story afterwards more interesting, isn't it?
Is he on the side of the law who comes for this guy after all the crap he's pulled, or what? I mean, he's no longer after him. He's told him that, but does he defend him and subsequently break the law?
He certainly can't travel with him continuously, so... And honestly, you have the same problem with Red Harvest. In a lot of ways.
In a lot of ways.
But if you fleshed him out, you could have a thing with Red Harvest where he goes where the wind blows him. Like, he could be a magical
just
character.
A whole new movie with just Red Harvest.
Yeah,
absolutely. Like going from town to town. He seems like that character. He was actually the original of these men, where he goes where he goes.
I honestly think, in a way, he was kind of Chico, where he kind of just shows up to join this band because he's fascinated with them. But we just don't get enough of that either. But that, like every other character, there's just not enough of the nuggets that we're given.
Yeah, it's funny when we do this a lot when we do these conversations. Is we really love the original movie, so we don't have much to say about it because it's just so good. So we keep coming back to this remake to talk about all the things that could have been better, right?
We tried to remake the remake.
Yeah, we do, and it's true. We do. It's kind of our pattern. And I just wanted to go back to the original and just talk about how good it was before we do wrap up, because this is almost a perfect movie.
I'd agree with
brilliant.
you. I when I finished watching this, streaming it, and I'm like, I might have to get a physical copy of this.
Absolutely.
Because I can see myself watching this again and again.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, aside from this, at the very beginning, there's some really great overreaction scenes. I don't want to talk about those because the big eyes and the way that they almost look at the camera, like they almost spike the camera, right? That was probably the only thing that keeps it from being a perfect movie for me, right? But this was typical of the 1960s, right? So I forgive it because it's not something we would see now, but is something you would see then.
Yeah,
right?
Even great films still lack the polish of a modern film.
That's right. Yeah. But otherwise, the only thing that keeps it from being a perfect movie for me is the whole Petra coming onto Chico thing. I don't mind that it happened. I just wish they'd handled it with a softer hand. It was really ham-handed.
Yeah, like it could have been this whole thing where they have more interactions, and you can see where maybe Chico is trying to like change that initial perception. Yep. Or she even gets to meet some of the other men. She's like, yeah, they're definitely not the same people I thought they were. Yeah. And I mean, it handled so brilliantly with Charles Bronson. Like, there's a warmth there that I freaking just could watch. It was so good.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
Yeah, so that was the only thing that I found particularly ham-handed in this whole movie was that relationship. And it had to happen in order to give that full circle to Chico, right? I mean, he had to have that motivation to stay, because if he didn't have somebody to stay with, he would not have stayed. Right? So it served a purpose, and so it worked in that sense for me.
Yeah, like, and you could have also changed the dynamic, like with having, because Petra was the one who came out to like spy for the other women. If they sort of said something about that, like she was the sparkier version of Chico, but just amongst the female population. Like she was.
Well, and you think about Chico too, like give him another couple of years and he might be, the town sheriff or whatever, as this village grows into a town.
Because he has that experience.
Yeah, he has experience. He helped defend this town. He's definitely going to be the hero that stayed. And the other town, I'm like, I felt needed one of them to stay.
Yeah.
But you couldn't have Vasquez stay. He's on the run.
Yeah.
He's still going to be on the run by the end of this movie. You probably couldn't leave Red Harvest to stay because of just
they wouldn't accept
rampant racial tensions at the time.
And Chisholm was never going to stay.
Chisholm was never going to stay.
And your
he's
female
just not
lead,
that guy.
she's got an uphill battle just having them take her seriously as a woman. So, I mean, it would have been fun. I would have loved that. But man, you know what? Just the regular ending. It could have been in Blazing Saddles. A black sheriff.
Yeah.
That'll never work.
Oh, now I'm going to watch that. There's a perfect segue into this, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. There's your sequel.
In the original, Gene Wilder auditioned for the original.
He did.
7.
He did. I don't know. Gene's one of those guys that I just don't see outside of comedy in my brain.
Which is funny because, like Leslie Nielsen, he started out as a serious actor.
He did, yeah.
But, I mean, he didn't really get a lot of work until he became a comedic actor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it has a lot to do with Gene Wilder's look. Like, he has one of those looks that's hard to take him seriously because of just his facial structure and his eyes and stuff, right?
But you can do that move, but you have to go straight, deep character actor.
Yeah.
Like, I can think of a lot of character actors, like, oh God, the guy who plays, like, the bad German in, like, Civil War, the Marvel Universe, where he was that person who made the Winter Soldier and that creepy evil guy, Toby something or other.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I know.
And he's very much a character. I could see him being a comedic actor, but he went full character, so now that's what you associate with.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that would have been the other direction that Wilder could have gone. But I'm so glad he went comedy. Just...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, Three Amigos is the comedy version of this movie, so just with less people.
Yeah,
where we learned the wrong analysis of the word infamous. It means you're more than famous. No, it doesn't.
Yes, but yeah, I mean, it's funny how when a movie's really good, we tend to almost stop talking about it because there's nothing to talk about. It was good.
I think we gave equal. I think we gave him equal time today. So
yeah, we did. We absolutely did our best. But
and there's so much to talk about, and we talk more about the characters in these films rather than the main plot structures. And there's definitely differences there as well. But
the core story
is the same. And if you like Magnificent Seven, definitely go seek out the original Kurosawa Seven Samurai. There's an anime called Samurai 7, which is also pretty great. As we said, Battle Beyond the Stars is also this movie. So, and there was the Magnificent Seven television series, A-Team, really, as well. The pilot is this movie. It's Magnificent Seven. So,
if you can hire them and if you can find them,
So
going back to George Papard again,
Yeah, so lots of stuff out there to check out if you are a fan of this particular thing that Akira Kurosawa started. So, and I'm sure there'll be plenty more. We will talk about Samurai 7 another day, 7 Samurai. Hopefully that remake will happen, so I actually don't sound stupid saying that. Looking into the future, it was on our sheet of last year when we went through all the remakes in production. That's kind of why I held it off. Yeah. And it's much easier to talk about 2 films than 4.
Yes.
Exactly. Although
as we know.
Here's the thing, if it does fall behind or it doesn't even happen, we could just have a conversation of everything that was spawned from that movie.
Yeah, and that could still happen. We may have a feature just on that particular film. So, or just, we might concentrate on the works of Kurosawa. Who knows? But that's another thing to tackle another day. Look for it somewhere down the road. Until then, are there any Westerns you would like us to cover that have been remade or haven't been remade? There's been plenty of both. So let us know. You can know that. Let us know on our social media, at Invasion Remake on Twitter, Invasion of the Remake, like our page on Facebook, or invasionoftheremake@gmail.com. And leave your questions, suggestions, comments, things we might have missed, and God knows we have. Just you can start a discussion of your own in any of those places, and we will certainly interact with you there. Another way you can help out this show is spread the word. If you see us post on our social media, repost it on your own walls. We certainly love that you like it as well. So like it and share it out with your friends so they can discover the show, and tell them where to find it. You can find us on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play Music, TuneIn Radio, Player FM, Blueberry, and Spreaker, as well as frickin' YouTube.
Frickin' YouTube.
Yeah, help us get more
earballs
on the show. You can also stop into iTunes and Apple Podcasts, leave a brief review and a 5-star rating, or 4, whatever stars you got to give. It gives other people feedback and whether this show might be for them or not. It's not going to be for everybody, but if you like it, help other people who might like shows like this to find it.
Exactly. I just recommend leaving a star review to less than Magnificent Seven.
Yeah, because it only goes to 5.
I know.
But if you can give us 7, we'd love that.
Exactly.
7 out of 5.
Or do it twice.
Yeah, we're not part of a big conglomerate, and we don't have celebrities hosting this show, so we're not making any money off this show. Mm-hmm. Just help spread the word, support independent podcasts, and that's how you can help us out. We're just
podcast gunslingers.
That's right.
Independent contractors wandering through the movie universe.
Yeah, we're wandering the wild, wild frontier of podcasts. And we're avoiding the big towns, apparently.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, but we're loving the growth we've had in the last couple months. So help keep that going. And
we really do love our new listeners out there.
Yes. We've had a lot, and you guys in Dublin are coming out.
All right, Dublin.
I'm guessing Trisha's trip out there is made it an impression.
I didn't hurt Canadian-Irish relations, I can tell you that.
No, that's right. You guys are catching up to the UK and might pass them soon. So,
and there's a motive for you if nothing else.
Right?
You guys are awesome.
Beat the UK.
You can do this.
It's just. I'm like, wait a minute, the UK's beating us? No way.
You can do this.
Well, wait a minute, aren't they part of the UK?
Northern part.
Well, in my stats, they count as separate.
And and you know what? And they should be recognized as separate. And I just want to make sure that we're not glomming them in unnecessarily.
No. In my statistics, Ireland stands apart. Thanks for coming out, guys. You're doing a wonderful job, and spread love all our listeners around the world. So some countries may only have one, but we're spreading out, and I'm loving to see that. So
yeah, it is Irish. It's like the Charles Bronson, he was Irish Mexican, which they only drop halfway through the movie.
Yeah. Yes.
Which at the end you're like, you don't understand where he's coming from, and then they just get to it, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yep. No, both movies have a interesting multicultural casts.
Yes.
Which is perfect. I mean, like that was part of the wild. It was people just looking to make their fortune.
Yep.
It was a whole bunch of people.
Yeah. Well, that was Magnificent Seven. One was magnificent. One was adequate. The Adequate Seven.
I don't think that would really have been sold as a movie. The Adequate Seven.
Well, if they had been honest about it, yeah.
Or just call it The Seven.
Can you imagine somebody?
There's just 7.
Somebody going out for fighting gunslingers like, no, we're magnificent. I'm like, oh, I think we can afford adequate. Where's the adequate, guys?
Yeah. We can't afford magnificent.
we can get 7 adequate and 3 magnificents. So we'll go 7 adequate.
Yeah. See, this is what that Adam Sandler parody should have been. The Adequate 7 instead of the Ridiculous 6.
That's
the
right.
Adequate 7.
I didn't even mention that one. That's on Netflix.
And Byung-hun Lee, where he was already part of a Western remake. The Good, the Bad, and the Weird.
Yeah. I recommend looking at that one. I've only seen the trailer for that one, and man, it looks great. So I would definitely check that out. A very, I guess, martial arts Eastern approach to what a American Western would look like, and think about mashing that together.
Well,
oh my God, how great is that?
As the directors wanted it known, a kimchi Western.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
Not spaghetti, but kimchi.
Yes.
Yeah, go check that out. And I highly recommend, if you haven't seen the classic Magnificent Seven, go check that out. And, the remake hits Netflix. Go ahead and check that out as well.
I mean, it's still a good popcorn movie. It's still something that you can sit and watch and kill a couple hours with if you've got nothing else to do.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's not that it's not entertaining. It just doesn't compare to the original.
Yeah. 2 more weeks, and then we hit October here, and we get into the horror movies. We'll remake a couple. We will also do some comparisons to some horror stuff. We love doing it. And we will start doing our 31 Days of Horror Trek. Look for that episode to drop early November, because, we actually have to watch them. The rules are, got to watch a horror movie we have never seen before, 1 per day for the month of October, and then we will give you the roundup of that in a special episode at the beginning of November. And if you want to join along, you can start planning out your cues now. And we'd love to hear what you are watching for the 31 Days of Horror Challenge. Again, it's got to be movies you haven't seen before, and you get do at least one movie a night. You know,
or you have to average one movie a night.
Average. Sometimes days your nights are full, but you can double up another night as long as you hit 31 by the end of October.
And and there's some that I saved from last year just so I could do them this year, because otherwise you're looking at, and hopefully, depending on which movies we do, because otherwise it's 37 horror movies. When we combine what we have to do versus what our challenge is.
Yeah, we don't talk to each other about what we're doing, so sometimes there's crossover between what we're doing. Watch our Twitter feeds as well, Sam and I, and maybe
I'm
Trish
going to try this year.
But Sam and I will at least try to post a little bit about what we're watching, and you can see the roundup of that, or listen to the roundup of that.
It's the only time I tweet every year is 31 Days of Horror. I tweet. Other than that, unless somebody tweets me, I'm not very
we're
tweeters.
Our personal, unless somebody's engaging us directly, we're not overly active on it because we are out there watching movies for you.
Yes. And, and I recommend, if you're listening to this podcast, I recommend doing it yourself. It is a challenge. You sort of get a little bit burnout, but man, you see a lot of interesting stuff you probably never would have seen.
Yeah. There's about midway through, you start hitting that I regret this life choice.
And then you get over the hump, and the last week's is always fun last.
I didn't actually hit a hump last year because I stuck with primarily independent films and things with strong reviews that I hadn't seen, and so I had a pretty good ride. That was probably my easiest ride through the 31 Days of Horror Challenge. I'm a veteran at this point. I've done 4 or 5 of them, but it was your firsts for both of you. So.
It's a learning curve. I mean, at some point I'm like, I'm looking at this and I'm feeling nothing. Is something really wrong with me?
It's too bad my
really
old MySpace posts have disappeared because it was quite an interesting journey. I would write a little bit about the film and the psychological impacts it was having upon me.
Halfway through, you start to worry about yourself.
Right?
A little bit.
Probably why I did a lot more horror comedies this past year.
It's nice to mix it up. Yeah, you get a couple really dark things in there, and then to throw horror comedy in there does kind of take the edge off. So that you can bear some of these darker themed horrors. Like some of the ones I watched last year were really dark.
Yeah, and if you haven't heard that episode, that might be a good way to start October, is to go back and listen to our 2016 horror challenge, and it's a good primer for what's to come.
Yeah, and if you're running low on what you want to watch, there's a ton. We listed all the movies that we did.
Yeah, think about it. We had 31 movies each. Yes, there's some crossover in there.
We probably had about 75 movies in total on there, I would think.
Yeah, so it was a nice big discussion and lots of interesting stuff on there.
So if you're stuck, we can help you out.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to the list myself this year because there's some stuff that Trish and Jay watched that sounded really interesting. So I'm going to go back and pull off that list and watch some of those.
Yeah, I'd say that I do that with your guys' list. It probably will be unintentional because I have more than enough to get me through another month. So,
and I'm sure I'll have no problem finding stuff as well. But that's just a reminder to me to go back and watch those ones. I said, "Oh, that sounds really good. I want to watch it." Right. So some of the stuff that piqued my interest while we were talking about it.
Yeah, I watched a couple you mentioned, but there was a few where I'm like, they sounded really. I'm just going to save those. Just save those for the other side.
All right, well, that is it for Magnificent 7. We will be back next week with a episode that we're going to remake. Until then, I've been Jason.
I'm always Sam.
I will continue to be Trish.
We are out of here.
We're ashamed to live here. Our fathers are cowards.
Don't you ever say that again about your fathers, because they are not cowards. You think I'm brave because I carry a gun? Well, your fathers are much braver because they carry responsibility. For you, your brothers, your sisters, and your mothers. And this responsibility is like a big rock that weighs a ton. It bends and it twists them until finally it buries them under the ground. And as nobody says they have to do this, they do it because they love you and because they want to. I have never had this kind of courage. running a farm, working like a mule every day with no guarantee will ever come of it. This is bravery. That's why I never even started anything like that. That's why I never will.